Right now, Iran is on a knife's edge. You've got this protest movement on the inside that's shaking the very foundations of the regime. And on the outside, you have world powers basically drawing lines in the sand. So today, we're going to unpack this whole explosive situation, because what happens here could honestly reshape the entire Middle East.
So what happens now? I mean, that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? You've got a government basically at war with its own people, and you have the rest of the world starting to pick sides. The whole situation is a total tinderbox. To really get a handle on how we got here, we've got to look at the spark that lit this whole thing up.
Okay, let's just be clear about this. This is not some veiled threat. This is a direct, in-your-face challenge from the Speaker of Iran's parliament. He's basically saying, look, if you attack us, your military bases and your allies in the area are fair game. I mean, wow, this is the kind of talk that can lead to actual war. But to understand why they're talking so tough, you have to look at what's been brewing inside their own borders.
So long before these big international threats started flying around, there was a fire starting right on the streets of Iran. People were just fed up with the economy, fed up with the government, and they took that anger out onto the pavement. And what began as a protest about the price of, everyday stuff, well, it turned into a roar for real fundamental change.
500. Just let that number sink in for a moment. According to one human rights group, that's the estimated number of people who lost their lives. People killed by their own government, all for daring to speak out. This isn't just a number. It's the staggering human cost of this crackdown.
So how did a protest over the economy become a full-blown uprising? Well, you can see it right here. It all kicked off in late December because prices for basic goods were just skyrocketing. But it didn't stay about the economy for long. It morphed, it grew into a huge movement against the country's clerical rulers. And the government's response? It was swift and it was brutal. We're talking a deadly crackdown, and they even shut down the internet trying to keep the world from seeing what was happening. But it was too late. The world was already watching.
Yeah, a fire that big, it doesn't go unnoticed. As the protests got bigger and louder, the world really started to pay attention. And it wasn't long before some key international players decided to get involved and started throwing, well, what you might call gasoline on the flames.
And first up, the United States. President Trump was not shy about this at all. He went right out on social media and declared that the USA stands ready to help the protesters. Now, if you're a protester, that's a huge message of support, but you can bet the Iranian government saw that as something else entirely, a direct provocation.
Then you've got Israel, Iran's biggest rival in the region. And yes, they also voiced support for the protesters. But what's really interesting is what they didn't do. They made it pretty clear they weren't going to jump in this time. And for Israel, that's actually a surprisingly cautious move, which just tells you how incredibly tense and complicated this whole thing is.
And of course, you've got voices from the outside trying to influence what's happening on the inside. Reza Pahlavi, the son of Iran's last Shah, is telling people from exile, do not abandon the streets. But you gotta ask, right? How much pull does someone who hasn't been in the country for decades really have? It's a huge question mark hanging over the whole thing.
Okay, so the battle lines are drawn. You have chaos on the streets inside Iran, and you have these major international players weighing in from the outside. And that's when the war of words really kicks into high gear. It's like a high-stakes poker game where each side is daring the other to make a move, and nobody wants to be the one to blink first.
And here is a perfect example of that war of words. Here's President Trump tweeting that Iran is looking at freedom perhaps like never before. Now that's the American narrative in a nutshell. We're the champions of freedom, we're with the people. But if you're sitting in Tehran, you're not hearing freedom, you're hearing regime change.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. You have two totally different realities being pushed. The US says, hey, we're just standing with people who want freedom from an oppressive government. Meanwhile, Iran is saying, no way. This is a foreign plot by the US and Israel to overthrow us. The truth might be somewhere in the middle, but in a conflict like this, the story you tell can be just as powerful as any weapon.
And just look at how this whole thing spirals out of control. It's a really dangerous cycle. First, Iran points the finger at the US and Israel. Then, the US comes back and threatens to attack Iran to protect the protesters. Iran fires back with its own threat of retaliation, which brings us right back to that quote we saw at the beginning. All while the police on the ground vow to get tougher with so-called rioters. It just goes round and round, getting closer to the edge each time.
So where does all this leave us? What on earth happens next? You've got a nation in turmoil, an entire region basically holding its breath, and superpowers on what looks like a collision course. The future, not just for Iran, but for the whole Middle East, really does hang in the balance.
Let's just do a quick recap of the major players in this game. You've got the Iranian government cracking down hard while blaming everyone else. You have the United States threatening to intervene. You've got Israel watching very carefully from the sidelines. And then, right in the middle of this massive geopolitical chess match, you have the Iranian people themselves, risking literally everything for a shot at a different future.
So we end up right back where we started, with this one huge question. With all these threats flying around and so many lives on the line, who is going to make the next move? In this absolute tinderbox of a situation, who will blink first? And when the smoke finally clears, what's going to be left? The stakes just could not be higher.